You should be thinking about your deal progression in a stage basis rather than a meeting basis. Most people, when they think about their deal process, they think about, okay, first I do a discovery call, then I do a demo, then we show them pricing, and they think a deal is progressing just because they have met with the prospect. That is not true. You can meet with somebody, show them a demo, have a conversation, and that doesn't necessarily your deal has moved forward. The flip side of that is your deal can progress, your deal can move towards close without you meeting with them live. And so the reframe is, instead of thinking about meeting-based deal progression, you need to be thinking about stage-based deal progression. And the only way that somebody moves from one stage to another is when they meet certain exit criteria.
What's going on, folks, and welcome to Module 1 on driving deal velocity, which is how to establish your sales stages. Now, you might be thinking, why the heck are we talking about something as boring as sales stages? This is all about driving deal velocity. You cannot drive deals quickly if you don't know the steps or the stages that your deal needs to go through to go from open all the way through close. If you clearly map out the things you need to get your prospect to agree to in chronological order, then what you can start to do is you can start to combine multiple stages or multiple exit criteria into one meeting where you can possibly get them to agree to a problem, agree to a solution, maybe even agree to price all in one call, versus having these elongated sales calls where you'll have 5 more calls than you actually need to get your deal closed. So we're gonna map out every single stage step by one so that you can clearly identify what you need to get accomplished in your sales cycle so that you can consolidate and drive through those stages as quickly as humanly possible.
So in this section, we are going to cover the key concepts and principles as it relates to establishing your sales stages. Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk through the way that Armand and I think about the different stages of a sale and the different approaches that we use to drive velocity stage by stage by stage. And so we're going to start with the underlying principles. The biggest one, and this is a reframe that I had to have recently, which is you should be thinking about your deal progression in a stage basis rather than a meeting basis. Most people, when they think about their deal process, they think about, okay, first I do a discovery call, then I do a demo, then we show them pricing, and they think a deal is progressing just because they have met with the prospect. That is not true. You can meet with somebody, show them a demo, have a conversation, and that doesn't necessarily your deal has moved forward. The flip side of that is your deal can progress, your deal can move towards close without you meeting with them live. And so the reframe is, instead of thinking about meeting-based deal progression, you need to be thinking about stage-based deal progression. And the only way that somebody moves from one stage to another is when they meet certain exit criteria.
And that brings us to number 2, which is you should be using exit criteria to focus on what you need to get, not what you need to do. And so this is a really common mistake that sellers will make is they'll say, my next step is I need to do a demo with my champion. That is not actually what is important in driving through that stage. What's important is you need to get your champion to agree that you're the vendor of choice. And there are multiple ways or things you could do to accomplish that exit criteria. You could do a technical demo. You could walk them through a case study. You could introduce them to a reference. You could go through a proof of concept. And so when you focus on what do you need to get or what decision do you need your prospect to make, it allows you to, 1, get creative and think of multiple ways to solve for that need. But then number 2, it prevents you from doing unnecessary activities where you might not need to do another demo just because you did it on the last call if your prospect has already said, you're the vendor of choice. And that brings me to the last point, which is number 3. You can never skip stages, but you can combine stages. So this is, again, why it's really important to focus on the things you're trying to get out of your sales cycle instead of the things that you're trying to do. So a lot of sellers think that I need to do a discovery call, and then I need to do a demo call, and then I need to do a proposal call. That's 3 separate calls. I can consolidate that into 2 calls if I instead think about what are the 3 things that I needed my prospect to agree to in those 3 calls. I needed them to agree to a problem, agree that we were the best solution, and agree on a price. Well, if I can get them to agree to a problem and a solution, on a really well-run first discovery call where we find the problem, we do a harbor tour demo, they're like, I've seen enough, we're good to go. Then all I need to do is set up the proposal call and I can completely skip the traditional demo call. So you can combine multiple stages into one call, but you can never skip stages entirely. So you can never go to proposal stage without a prospect having agreed to a problem first.
It's not like every single call you're able to condense things down, but you're looking for opportunities in the sales cycle to do that. So if you have a discovery call and there just like isn't time to do that demo, fine. You're not going to be like, great, we can skip the demo because I think they agreed to the solution. You're orienting yourself around every single time. How do I get a little bit closer to that exit criteria on that call? So another way you would do that is, I do this a lot on my deals, show them the demo, and then we budget 15 minutes at the end where I get into the commercials, we get into pricing, so we get agreement on that piece. So you're always looking for opportunities to combine. Let's move to the next piece where we're going to talk about the stage. We're going to do 4 things here. We're going to define the different stages of the sales cycle. We're going to talk about the exit criteria that you need to achieve in each individual stage. We're going to talk about who you need on the buyer's side, typically, and then we'll talk through some of the key activities or things that you can do to help progress deals in that stage to get that exit criteria.
So let's start with stage number 1, which is discovery. To be clear, this does not mean discovery call.
Right.
This means you are doing the act of discovery. The exit criteria for stage 1 is problem agreement. And what that means is your champion has explicitly agreed to a problem that matters to the organization. Let's talk about what bad problem agreement sounds like. There are 3 levels to bad to good problem agreement. Bad problem agreement sounds like they love Pipedrive. That's not a problem. That is a sentiment or a degree of excitement that you will see in your champion's face, but that is not a problem. Okay might sound like, you know, they spend a lot of time tinkering around in clunky dashboards. That's a problem that might matter to a director of RevOps, but I don't know if the VP of sales really cares that the director of RevOps is tinkering around and wasting time in dashboards. But a great problem sounds like this. The director of RevOps is completely bogged down in manually doing all of their reporting exercises. And the problem is they're not actually able to identify all of their at-risk deals without their RevOps leader doing this, which means that if your RevOps person gets sick or leaves the office, literally the VP of sales has stated that they won't be able to put together an accurate forecast. That's a problem that is clear. It matters to both the champion and it matters to the person above the line.
And so the 2 main ways that you're going to accomplish that exit criteria in this stage are, 1, the prospect explicitly articulates that they have that problem. They tell you this is a big issue. Great, they told you. The other, probably less commonly used way is you get data to validate that they have a problem and they say, yes, that is a problem. And so an example of this is I used to sell this really bespoke billing software to law firms. And law firms have a metric that they look at called their bill realization rate, meaning if they bill $100, how many dollars of that 100 do they ultimately end up collecting? Because there's often client disputes, or sometimes people won't pay, or when they bill insurance companies, those companies fight them on the bills. And so for a law firm, having above like an 85% billing realization rate honestly is a good thing. And so if a law firm said to me, hey, yeah, you know, we're looking to improve our billing realization rate, it's not very good, and then we ran a report and realized that they had a 96% billing realization rate, there was no problem. And so another way that you can validate that there is a problem worth solving is with data, with like either a data or a process audit. And so that is one other way that you can illuminate that there is a problem that needs to be solved and thus move to the next stage.
It's also worth noting that you might have to run multiple discovery calls to get to true problem agreement if you're in a particularly complex solution.
Yeah.
So for example, you might do an initial discovery call with that director of RevOps, but then you might need to do that again with a director of sales to really understand how this is impacting the frontline leaders. And that's going to happen before you go into a more technical demo where you're getting to solution agreement.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, Armand. I mean, like, even if I think about that billing realization rate one that I just talked about, we would uncover that on a discovery call, but we certainly weren't pulling metrics live. And so I was selling, it was actually, the billing part was part of a broader ERP. And so we would get 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 pretty big problems that they were looking to solve. And then we would validate which ones needed to progress to the demo stage of the full solution with with data. Hey, you actually don't have a billing realization rate problem, so you probably don't need our billing solution, but on the AP invoice processing side, this is what we're seeing in terms of resolution time, in terms of paying those things, and you said you wanted to fix that. So you're totally right, where there will be multiple meetings depending on the complexity of what you sell to progress things.
Bingo. So if stage one is they've clearly agreed to a problem, maybe it happened through a discovery call, maybe it happened through this data audit, whatever it might be. Stage two is demo.
What's going on, folks? There are literally only two things that you need to nail as a salesperson if you want to make it to President's Club. The first is your ability to fill your calendar up with meetings and create new pipeline, aka prospecting. The other thing you have to nail is your ability to drive those deals to close. And since you've made it this far in the video, I've got a gift to help you do both of those things. If you use the code YouTube at 30mpc.com/courses, you'll actually get $50 off our two best courses to help you nail both the creation of pipeline and the closing of pipeline. The first course is called Cold Calls to President's Club, and in that course, we teach you what to do, what to say, and how to sound in every single part of a cold call, from your call opener to how you pitch, to how you overcome objections, to voicemails and gatekeepers, and more. The second course is our discovery course, which is focused on how to sell in a way that doesn't feel like selling. And in that course, we teach you how to uncover massive 6- and 7-figure business problems that companies actually want to pay to solve. And we'll teach you the way to structure your calls. We'll teach you the questions to ask. We'll teach you how to get to the decision maker and drive timeline and make discovery something that you know how to do effortlessly. And again, if you go to 30mpc.com/courses or go to the link below and use that code YouTube, you'll get $50 off any of the courses. I will see you at President's Club.
So after they've agreed to a problem, the next exit criteria is, again, not run a demo call, but get solution agreement. In other words, you need to say, hey, you mentioned or you agreed to this problem, and now you are agreeing that we are the best vendor to solve that problem for you. So here's again what good sounds like. Good sounds like they recap the problem. They say, yes, that's still the problem. And I feel like your solution is the best equipped to help us solve that problem. This happened really often for us at Pave, where someone might agree to the problem of my employees don't understand their stock options and they're leaving all the time for a $5K salary increase, even though they literally have $100,000 of options that are sitting on the table. And then they would see Pave, which was a total reward statement that showed them the upside of their cash salary and their equity combined. They would see it and they would be like, literally, if I had this thing today, I bet I could have saved 3 of those employees. That is what great solution agreement sounds like.
And so there's a couple different ways that you can get that solution agreement. The most obvious one is you show them a demo, they see the solution, and they say, yes, this is the best solution to solve my problem. Some other ways you could get that is instead of them seeing the solution, they test or they try the solution with a POC, a proof of concept. Another way that you can get solution agreement, and this might be for something a bit more complex, is you might co-create, you and the prospect together, create a shared business case where you put onto paper the problems that they agreed that they have, how your product solves those problems, and then you might also put like the impact of, oh wow, this is what this is going to drive for the business by solving those problems. That's another way that you can get the prospect to say, yeah, this solution matters, this solves my problem. And this now takes us to the next stage, which is multi-threading. The exit criteria that we set from the multi-threading stage is that power, somebody who is able to sign the contract, agrees that your solution is the best solution to solve that problem. So it's similar to that demo stage. The only key difference here is we are getting somebody from a higher altitude to agree, yes, this is the best solution for us.
So we'll dive deep on how this meeting goes in the next module, but the most common way to get power agreement is with what we call the big team meeting, where you're recapping everything you've learned in discovery, you're recapping everything you've learned in the solution agreement or the demo stage, and then you're bringing that and presenting it to power, and you're getting them to weigh in on it themselves. That said, sometimes power doesn't need to see the full disco recap, demo, all of that stuff. And oftentimes, another way that you can get power agreement is just by having a really, really tight business case that you've presented with your champion. Or you might need to do both of those things. You might need to show power the end-to-end solution, everything you've learned in discovery, and then you might need to do another call where you say like, okay, now we're going to recap the results of everything we've done and roll it up into here's how much money you're actually going to save if you buy us here at Pipedrive.
Yeah, a couple other ways that we can get power solution agreement are by having a reference call. So we set the prospect up with one of our best customers to give a glowing review, and they have a great conversation. Another tool that I like to use to exit this stage is the exec to exec meeting. So what you might do, particularly in a bigger sale, is you might get your CEO in front of some of the key executives at the prospect account to sell them on the executive relationship, especially with long-term enterprise sales. Your prospect wants to know that they have a way to get to the top, to resolve issues fast, to influence the roadmap, just to know that like, hey, this CEO here, we're not just small fish in the sea, we're an important customer. So the exec to exec meeting is one I like to do. And then one of a similar nature is the roadmap sale. So oftentimes prospects want to know, where is this product I'm buying going to be in the next 6 months, year, 5 years, etc. And so by showing them the roadmap, you probably would need to pull in a product leader on your side or a CS leader on your side to show them, here are all these cool developments in the future that are going to help solve your problems even better. That's another way that you can get solution agreement from the prospect.
And this brings us to the most commonly, mistakenly skipped to stage, which is proposal and negotiation. So your exit criteria is commercial agreement. In other words, this sounds like your prospect agrees that the problem is worth solving, the solution is absolutely the right fit, power agrees that it's a problem, and all of those people agree that it's worth paying for, and all of the terms associated with that as well. The most common mistake that I see sellers make is they will show someone pricing in stage 1 or stage 2, and then they'll jump to proposal phase. Just because you are discussing pricing does not mean that you are in proposal phase. Oftentimes what happens is you might soft float a quote in discovery, or you might soft float a quote in demo. But until you've gotten problem agreement, solution agreement, power agreement, to me, you're not really seriously discussing and negotiating the proposal. The proposal and negotiation step means everything else is a go. And if your solution was free, they would buy it today. It's just a matter of agreeing on price.
And so this one is pretty straightforward as it relates to exit criteria. You're probably going to have a more formal proposal meeting where you say, great, here are the modules you're going to get. Here's what it costs. Here's the term. Here's all the other contract structural things that you need to know. The other way, unless they flat out say, great, let's buy this thing, that you're going to exit this stage is via negotiation conversations. So most prospects in a B2B sale are going to try to work you down a little bit. And so in order to formally exit this stage, you need to have agreement as it relates to the commercial terms.
So there are a number of calls that will happen as you try to get to commercial agreement. So usually what will happen is you'll have a first proposal call where you'll recap everything that happened in discovery, you'll recap all the ways that you could solve their problems, you'll recap what it meant for power, maybe you even present a business case, and then you finally show them the number. This is how much it costs to solve all of that stuff. From there, you usually have multiple negotiation meetings. So for example, that first proposal meeting might happen, and then you might go into multiple back and forth negotiations with power. Or you might do an initial negotiation with power, with your champion, what have you, and then you'll realize that, wait, this isn't actually the person who's going to make the final call. I need to now go into a procurement meeting, and procurement or the CFO is the person that I'm negotiating with. And so again, your proposal and negotiation meetings consist of you, 1, presenting price to the right person, 2, going through an initial negotiation, and then 3, probably going and working with finance or someone in procurement to ultimately land on your final price.
And once you've exited this stage by having agreement on the commercials, your deal is not done. You still need to be thinking about progressing and exiting the last stage, which is vendor review. The exit criteria for vendor review, Armand, is a signed contract. And so the things that you will be doing in this stage include meeting with their legal team to work through red lines or amendments to your contract, meeting with their IT team to make sure that you pass all their security and IT checks, meeting with your champion on a weekly or regular basis to help nudge those processes along and make sure that you don't get stuck in this process. The big thing that I see sellers screw up here is they think, great, we've got agreement on commercials. I've sent them the contract. I don't need to do anything as it relates to driving this deal to close. This is one of the biggest places that deals often linger and extend your sales cycle unnecessarily.
So folks, we covered the fundamentals of how to set up your sales stages, things like focusing on the things that you need to get instead of the things that you need to do, focusing on stages instead of meetings, etc. From there, we walked through the 5 sales stages: discovery, where the exit criteria is problem agreement; demo, the exit criteria is solution agreement; multi-threading, the exit criteria is power agreement; proposal negotiation, the exit criteria is commercial agreement; and then lastly, vendor review, where the exit criteria is you have a wonderfully signed contract.
And so we gave you a look at some of the common plays that you can use to accelerate a deal in each stage. In the next module, we're going to go deeper on the most common play that you will run stage by stage and give you a breakdown of how you can run it with mastery to accelerate your deal.